d5 and g3, the white player starts a setup that is like a Catalan. It's not exactly a Catalan, but we're gonna call it like that because we don't play knight f6. If you follow this channel, you don't play knight f6 after d4. So any attempt of transposition into some sort of Catalan would be called a Catalan. Now black plays bishop to f5. Let's see how to deal with this because it's extremely solid and super annoying. After bishop g2, e6. So we have to get the light square bishop out as soon as possible, and then e6. And after knight f3, familiar moves, and then white will castle. There is something that is like basically a Catalan. Knight f3, black continues with c6. It's very easy to remember pawn structure. We make this pyramid of light square pawns, and after castling, black plays knight to d7. And we, in this video and also in the previous, there's going to be, in the next ones, there's going to be many videos about the Catalan. We're going to go through openings like b3 variation or the one with e3. There's going to be a little bit of everything. The idea with c4 in this specific opening is not very good. Black continues with h6. The goal is to be able to develop the knight without it getting pinned. So after h6 and white continues with knight c3, it's pointless taking the pawn. You will just take back and then get an open file for the rook, so it's pointless. Knight c3, bishop e7, see how this will look like. And the familiar idea here is to attack the square e4 so that white can push e4. This is not possible already because black played the bishop in f5 and the pawn in d5. So after knight d2, there will be this move. Let's see how to deal with this setup, and then we'll go to the more serious line. Black plays knight g to f6, and after the whole swaps now e4, this gives nothing to white. Pawn takes, knight takes, knight takes, knight takes, and now knight f6. And in case the white player wants to keep swapping everything, we'll be able to deprive him of the light square bishop, which is important. Right now there's two attackers over the knight. We'll go through the variation where the knight takes. Let's just continue now with the more normal move, rook to e1, defending the knight a bit further. Black will just castle. And now, when the white player plays this setup with the bishop in fianchetto, black can take the knight. And after the bishop takes back, black continues with bishop to f6, putting double attack over the square in d4. And taking the bishop in f5 is not good now because this comes with a tempo. Bishop d4, attacking the rook, we will be able to recapture the bishop later. And the bishop will have to go to b2 because that was the whole point of this variation. Clearly e3 is not accessible because of the bishop. So after bishop b2, black will have to take the bishop, and now we're trading pieces. And now the best move is rook to e8. The idea is to double up the rooks. So now we're way out of theory, so let's just mention how this endgame should be played. Let's say queen e2. There could be so many moves now. Well, not too many actually. That would be correct. So as mentioned, rook e7 is the move now. So let's say rook to e1. This endgame will be played like this: rook to d7. So we've done all of this so that we could become able to attack this pawn a lot. You might argue that the rook could have gone to d1. Well, either way, from e7, the rook will just go to d7. And the idea, of course, is to win the game, well, at least get the small advantage that is necessary to win with pawn to c5. So in this case, according to the engine, the best move by white is rook to e1. So here we are. I think we're going to close the line now because this is the white player playing the best moves of the most solid, probably the best opening that there is, and white and black resisting. The game is slightly better for black, but there is no absolute advantage. The black's best move now is queen to a5. The position is evaluated about -1. So black is going to a slightly better endgame. Basically, I've showed the very first thing of this video, like the best line that there is for the white player. And now we're going to go on to talk about all the mistakes that there are in this very complicated opening and how to punish it. One more thing I'm going to mention is that after the queen's attack in the pawn in a2 and white wants to safeguard the pawn structure, will be bishop to a1. Best moves by black now, playing rook to d6 with the idea of playing rook a to d8. Just keep holding control of this diagonal, attacking the pawn and threatening c5 whenever that's the right thing to do. So once again, after d4, d5, g3, so the light square bishop goes out first. Bishop g2 and now e6, and after knight f3, c6, now white castle, and knight to d7. Let's quickly have a look at this c4 move once again. h6, the best move now to stop the potential pinning of the knight. Our knight in f6 will be very important. And after knight c3, bishop e7, and the knight preparing the e4. Then we play knight f6, and after e4, this is the white players whopping everything and going to the most drawing possible game. Pawn takes, 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 and takes. We need to mention that from the previous line we went on with the fianchettoed bishop. What happens after takes, takes, and now bishop e3 to protect the pawn further. Black's best move is to castle. Again, black now will have a slight advantage. So here we are in this position. The best move now is queen to b6. The idea obviously is to place a rook on the same file of this weakest white pawn, which is not very weak, but it can't push forward because of this clever pawn strategy, pawn structure that we have been placed at the beginning. It can't push forward because of this clever pawn structure that we placed since the very beginning. And the white rook can't move to the light square because of the bishop. So after b3, for instance, there could be other moves, but let's say b3, white will play rook a to b8, and the advantage is increasing. There's nothing that white can do to save the pawn. If instead of b3, more interesting move is queen to d2, which protects the pawn, develop the queen, and allows the white player to pile up the rooks. Black will play rook f to d8, and now of course black wants to open the lines. How do we face a situation like this? c5. This kind of move is met by queen c7 with the idea of playing e5. e5 is crushing and wins the game, right? And if e5 is met by f4, obviously stopping e5, then black may return to d7 with the queen back on the d file and start going for the pawn. And by the way, this pawn cannot be defended further because let's say rook a to d1, then bishop g4. The rook will have to move, and then we have access to the pawn. But let's say white puts the bishop between here in f3, then simply swap, rook takes back, and now queen to d5 attacks the rook and should be able to win a crucial point in material. So from the beginning, g3, and then bishop goes in fianchetto, then e6, knight f3, and now c6. We have built this pawn structure, we are familiarizing with it. After castle, knight d7. So let's have a look at b3. This is one of the many ideas that white can have when playing the Catalan. Black will continue beat bishop e7. One of the many crucial things that has to be said about this incredibly annoying opening and very solid opening that beat me so many times is that it is best not to place the knight early in f6, even though it looks so natural, because with this pawn structure, with the pawns in fianchetto like this in g3, h2, f2, you want to be able to push h5, h4 if possible, with the protection of the bishop and queen. The knight here is kind of in the way and it's annoying. Obviously, there's also a possibility to play h4 for white, but we'll see what to do then. So after bishop to b2, now placing the bishop in fianchetto, the white player will want to play c4 at some point and try to crush everything so the bishop becomes stronger. h5. So now the two main ideas, c4 that we will go through, or also h4 to stop the pawn. So let's mention h4, for example. This is met by g5. This is a great move. And we are going to be able to start swapping everything on the h file. We want to open everything, the pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and so on, right? This is going to be amazing for black. So after the pawn takes, the bishop takes, now it looks like everything's fine. Of course, any swap by white now will just improve the position of the black player, because then we will have h4, we will have the rook coming in. And after castling, you see, remember that the game here in the center is completely closed. White has no potential initiative. So if you get taken here, of course, we're not going to cover a line like that because it just gets easier and easier. After white develops the knight here in d2, black can play h4, right? So that's the idea. Try to remember all these patterns. And after, well, what to do now? Taking, of course, allows the black player to go towards the king. Soon enough, we got the bishop, the queen, everyone. Let's just mention a move now that is possible. Well, e4 is not possible because it gets taken. c4, we're going to look at it in a second. So after, let's say, queen e1, black will continue with the pawn taking in g3, for example. So the queen e1 was there to reinforce the diagonal, but this is not good because if pawn takes back, then bishop e3 will give black a very strong advantage, obviously. So let's say if white plays knight takes, then queen takes, obviously. Now it looks like white might be able to find some tranquility, but still, black is in a better endgame because he's gotta get a pawn in c4, got a rook on an open file near the king. So let's just see how to continue this. Like after knight f3, attacking the queen, pawn takes with check, queen f2. Looks like everything's fine for white, but black will just play queen to g7. Position is far superior for black. Black will be able to play a move like knight to f6, potentially reach any of these two squares, and black is also able to castle, and white cannot take any single initiative possibly because the center is completely closed. Best move by white here, computer move, would be to play e4, giving up a pawn, bishop takes, because of rook entering the game with a placement on the opponent on our king file. But simply knight f6 now, and this game should play itself, especially after the second black rook comes into play. So from the start, d4, d5, g3, and a bishop f5, bishop g2, e6. So we got the light square bishop out as soon as possible, knight f3, and now we build this familiar pawn structure. Castle and knight d7. So b3 we're looking at bishop e7, and after the bishop goes in b2, we play h5. So we saw more or less what to do after h4. Let's look at the main move by white, one of the main ideas that could be in this position, which is c4. Black doesn't care and just plays h4, and black has a good advantage already. Of course, taking the pawn either way will allow black to start swapping everything, and this king will be extremely vulnerable. Especially imagine if the knight takes, then you can take back, and then takes, and then the queen will go. So okay, just make an example. I mean, this is very beginner type of thing, so I wouldn't even bother keep looking at it. I mean, look at this. That's ridiculous, right? h3 can't come. We have a bishop as well, so we're not going to go through such thing. After h4, what happens if knight to d2? Typical maneuver. Well, of course, the knight will have to develop, although it doesn't have any future. We're going to look at some other lines as well. Now black takes the pawn. Two ways to take back. H takes isn't really that brilliant, although it's still fine because it's opening the file for the king. Black will continue with knight f6. It's fine if we block our bishop and queen attacking h4 because there's no more, there's nothing happening on h4. Let's see what happens after knight e5, the typical move to then play knight f3 later on. Also, potentially it might prepare white to play a move like e4, especially after rook e1 and so on. But remember, in this game, white doesn't have that free f3 e4 type of idea because it would be too weak, especially because the h pawn took the g3 pawn, so it would be too weak. The idea now is to play knight e4. This is the best move. And of course, if swap, then black again has a slightly better endgame because if knight takes, then pawn takes back. Black will have a possibility to play bishop h3 later on. That's an idea. It's not necessary. So, for example, right now the best move by black is knight to g5. Obviously, knight h3 will give black the completely winning endgame. So after knight takes and pawn takes, black has a simple idea now, which is bishop to b4, getting out of the way so that black can play queen to g5. So anyway, now it's white to move. Let's remember something crucial is that during this swap, now you have a pawn in e4, and in the d4, d5 games, when you have a pawn in d4 in e4 like this, the black player cannot play knight f3 anymore. Swapping will allow the black player to carry on with the plan and will give white absolutely nothing. Not swapping means that white just can't move anything. So let's say if it was black to move again, we would play bishop b4, queen g5, and then queen h5, and it would be game over, right? Of course, this is not possible because we don't get to play moves in a row, but you know the plan now. So the best move by white now, according to the engine, is to take the knight. This forces us to take with the queen, and we have to abandon the dark diagonal where we will be so threatening. The best move according to the engine now is queen to d2. And we're going to close the line after long castle because now we've learned all the things that we need to do after the white player takes the pawn in g3 with the pawn in h. And let's remember the plan is to play e5. If black were to play again now, one more move, it would be e5 and it would be winning. So let's make a super quick recap. So now after f5, bishop f5 and then bishop g2, e6, the knight moves, c6, white castles. The center is so close, we don't have to be that quick with development. And after b3, black plays bishop e7. It's crucial that we keep attacking h4 already. Bishop b2, and now h5. We're looking at the variation with c4. Okay, then h4. After knight to d2, we take the pawn. What happens if they take with the f pawn, which seems to be making sense? It's kind of more solid for the white king, and the rook is attacking an open file now. Black now plays knight to f6 because we no longer have that threat of swapping stuff in h4. This also puts more defense over the square e4, meaning that this pawn in e2 will be backward and will never be able to push since it's going to get taken. How do we respond to such idea? Like knight to h4, attacking the bishop, we have to save this amazing bishop, go to h7. If they take our pawn in d5 with the pawn in c, then we take with the pawn in c. We have a rook on an open file coming soon. If rook to c1, these moves look very normal, right? Then black plays knight to g4, obviously threatening knight e3. And it's funny that this cannot be stopped. White's best move according to the engine is e4. For example, it will give up material for the sake of some development happening. Obviously, after e4, there will be an attack on the knight, so on the knight you gotta do the tactic. But black is just much better, position evaluator over -3. And so, where did this tactic come from? Well, of course, from the very innocent-looking rook c1 move, which was wrong. But even then, the position is just better. Let's go back and move. Knight f6 position is just better for black because black has got massive advantage over this diagonal, the light square diagonal. Black has no weakness, and the c file belongs to the black rook actually.